Look, can we all just agree that AMD FX systems aren't worth what they were 3, 4, 5 years ago? That's probably not difficult for most of us to admit, but some people, it seems like, are still under the impression that FX is relatively modern. Look, I get it. You value your work. If you're still rocking an FX system and it's good enough for your gaming and workflow needs, congratulations. I'm not trying to harp on you here, and I understand this is probably going to come off sounding elitist to a few of you, but just bear with me. I have friends who are still on older hardware than FX, and I don't see them complaining. That's not to say that they wouldn't appreciate an upgrade, but they're likely content with what they have, or they'd do something about it, assuming they could afford it. But what really pisses me off is when I look through PC ads like this one here, and see a seller blatantly and inexplicably overprice a used FX system. Stay with me. If you're upset about that inconsiderate Windows activation watermark plaguing your screen, snag an OEM license. SCDKey makes it simple. You have one in a few seconds for a little over $10, then click here, 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 and then here, paste your activation key, and you can kiss that watermark goodbye. And be sure to use my new offer code GSL for a 12% discount on your order. So let's consider the AMD FX 6350 listed here in this Let Go ad. Custom built PC with 1660 Ti, 16 gigs of RAM, and an overclocked AMD FX 6350 6-core processor. Ha! Not according to the class action lawsuit settlement, and this is what I see a lot of sellers do with their FX platforms. They'll tout the core count, much in the same way AMD did, and actually still does when these chips first launched, and actually it's still listed on the website, you can find them now. And to a degree, I'll admit, you could interpret the bulldozer and pile driver architectures as boasting 4, 6, and 8 cores apiece. But that's only if you're willing to overlook the shared L2 cache, shared front-end resources, shared FPU, shared fetch cache. The list goes on. A lot of stuff is shared between modules. But the average shopper doesn't know lickety-split about computers and is gonna look at this ad, read this line, and think, wow, 6 cores in 2019 for this price, that ain't half bad. Now sure, the potential uneducated buyer who thinks this is arguably bringing this onto his or herself by shopping in a market in which he or she is not familiar. Survival of the fittest, and to an extent I agree, neglecting due diligence is your own fault. But that doesn't mean I'm now suddenly okay with the tactics being used here by the seller. So, I mean, look, in the case of the 6-core mentioning, do I think it's misleading? Not really, because it still says 6-core on AMD's own website, despite the CAL. So I'm not really gonna complain. They could just say they're going off of AMD's website, and if that's what they're saying it is, then fine. Whatever, I'm just pointing out the discrepancy. But back to the ad. Setup includes Razer Black Widow Ultimate 2016 edition. That's a keyboard, I believe it's a keyboard. A Logitech G502 mouse, Razer Kraken headset, extended desk mouse pad, and Acer 60Hz monitor. Okay, well, you didn't list the type of monitor it was. I'm gonna assume it's a cheap 60Hz monitor. And look, you'll also see some folks do this when they're selling a cheap system, right? Pump the listing full of peripherals that make it seem like a way better deal than it actually is. Wow, I'm not just getting a tower, I'm getting a monitor, I'm getting a mouse and keyboard and a mouse pad. Heck yeah, great deal, right? Well, for $2,000, I don't think so. I mean, we're actually so far off the mark here that it's laughable. What's even funnier is that the seller apparently had this listed for $2,700 originally, and I guess he just decided that was too high? I'm gonna hate to burst that bubble. So let's break down prices here, figure out what a system's actually worth. First up, the most expensive item here, the GTX 1660 Ti. It's used, but still a modern card. They're going for upper 200s new, so I'd settle for somewhere in the low to mid 200s used. So you know what, let's give them the benefit of the doubt and offer $250. $250 for a used 1660 Ti is, in my opinion, on the high side, but that's the point of the benefit of the doubt. The motherboard, which he failed to specify in this ad, is from MSI clearly, but I'm not entirely sure what model looks like. The Crate 970A, it's been a while, folks, and these are still pretty expensive for whatever reason on eBay, so we'll offer $100 to remain consistent with other used markets. Next up, RAM. 16 gigs of, remember, DDR3, not DDR4, runs for around $50 on eBay. Let's offer them exactly that. I'm not gonna try to cut any corners here. So we're at 300 total so far. The FX 6300 frequently sells for under $50, so 6350 isn't much different, so we'll offer them exactly that, $50. And that, again, in my opinion, is giving the seller at least a small benefit of the doubt. He's using the stock cooler, by the way, so we'll skip that. The power supply is unlisted, so we'll throw in a new $50 one from EVG. I recommend you buy new power supplies anyway. Buying used ones secondhand can be a bit sketchy. And storage is unlisted, so we'll assume a cheap and small 120 gig SSD, potentially a 1 terabyte hard drive as well. Either way, we're talking maybe 50 to 100 bucks in total, so I'm not gonna give him that much credit when putting this list together. Chances are if he had a dope storage array in this really cheap system, which I doubt, he'd have mentioned it in the description. Because he didn't though, it's probably insignificant, and that's why I'm choosing cheap storage. But even if I didn't, my conclusion would still be the same. It really doesn't put a dent in the asking price. So there are a few different pictures here, and I can't access them since this was a screenshot sent by a viewer, but important information should always be listed out to clear up any discrepancies in the photos. Because he didn't do that, I have really no way of confirming what's actually in the system and what he changed prior to the sale. Lastly, we have the case. I again can't tell exactly what this is, but we'll throw in 50 bucks for good measure. I mean, you can buy new cases for a little more than $50. Like the Fantex P350X is pretty good at around 70 bucks. The H500 from NZXT is pretty good for around the same price. So I don't feel comfortable throwing any more cash into the mix for a used case. And that leaves us at around 500 USD for the entire system, give or take a few bucks here and there for shipping, discounts, rebates, etc. We also have the monitor. Remember, he didn't list the model of the monitor, so it's probably a pretty crappy one. He said it was 60 Hertz, assuming 1080p. Used wouldn't pay any more than 50 bucks for a cheap low-end monitor. And then peripherals, the keyboard and mouse are pretty decent, but again, you don't want to pay retail for used peripherals. They're probably dirty as well. So I would say 100 bucks for the lot, just because I do, again, want to give him the benefit of the doubt, but I don't want to see like I'm trying to favor this guy at all. In real life, I wouldn't pay even 500 bucks for the entire setup. But if you wanted to build something similar for whatever reason on a dated platform, between 500 and 650 bucks, you could put this entire system together, including peripherals. I think that's fair. And the fact is, we're still not to even half of this guy's asking price. In fact, we're just barely a fourth of the way there. And that's why ads like these drive me crazy. You understand now, people overvalue their FX systems. Not everyone. I've seen great priced FX systems. I have no problems with those. You won't see one of those on this channel in this format. But when you do it on purpose to make huge gains on all the hardware, it's just kind of distasteful. I mean, come on, take 15 seconds, look up the price of an FX 6350, and you'll know immediately that your system is not worth anywhere near what you are asking for it. I honestly feel uncomfortable even offering, again, like 500 bucks for the system and peripherals included for a few reasons. For one, it's a dated platform. It's a dead end. AM3 Plus is not going anywhere. Any attempt to upgrade the CPU will still be limited by the architecture's IPC and efficiency. The only real upgrade here is the 8000 series CPU, the jump from the 6000 series that we're on now, or the 9000 series if you're into turning your system into a toaster oven. It's a glass ceiling, not one I'd recommend you deal with. And second, assuming you were content with the compute power of piledriver architecture, which who knows, you might be for the price, you'd still be graphically limited in the future if you decided that the 1660 Ti wasn't a good enough card for whatever games you happen to be playing. Now, sure, there are a few games out there, I'm not sure if they're more or less than the opposite of what I'm about to say, of those games that couldn't care less what CPU you're running, right? Especially in higher resolutions. Some games, it doesn't matter if you have a Pentium G4560 in there or a Core i9-9900K. But I'd wager that even the 1660 Ti is at least an occasional bottleneck here and there with a lot of games. Not something you want to deal with in the long run, especially for about 500 USD. And for the same price, you could put together a comparable Ryzen 3 system that would outperform the heck out of this one. So my counter to this seller's $2,000 asking price would honestly be somewhere around, personally, around $300-400. And I don't mean to insult with that offer. He might think it's insulting, but the used market values of his components say otherwise. Part of the problem too, you know, is the fact that this guy, assuming it's a guy, because most gamers in this industry are statistically guys, that's why I'm assuming he's a guy, I'm assuming the gender. Relax, okay? Probably believes his PC is worth $2,000 or somewhere close to it. People who don't keep up with hardware releases or hardware prices and who live in their own little gaming bubbles, with their own systems and think it's great for 10 years probably would know that Ryzen is as good as it is for the money, which is why I would almost always recommend even a Ryzen 3 processor instead of an 8-core or a 6-core AMD FX chip. The AM4 platform is considerably more versatile and still technically relevant when seen in the context of backwards compatibility. I do suppose that an even worse scenario, though, would be the one where the guy knows that his PC is cheap and chooses instead to rip someone off anyway. And this goes back to the due diligence we discussed earlier. I'll never fault the seller for trying to maximize profit. That's the point of selling something, after all. If you want to start at a higher price point than what you're comfortable letting the product go for, more power to you. That's how it's supposed to be, in my opinion. But when your intentions are to rip someone off, that's where I draw the line. What if I sold you a car with a blown transmission and you didn't know it because the car was bought sight unseen and you just went off my word? It happens all the time. What if I sold you a PC with a Core i3, but I photoshopped images to make it look like it was a Core i7? I'm sure it's happened. And what if, this is an analogy that hits a bit closer to home, what if I told you a CPU was worth way more than it actually was on any site, anywhere, in any currency? At what point should we blame the buyer more than the seller? If the buyer's gullible, sure, it's at least partly the buyer's fault in my eyes, especially when proper research wasn't done beforehand. You're kind of asking for it at that point. But again, that doesn't change the fact that the seller tried to rip you off and mislead you into thinking said product was worth way more than it actually was. Just food for thought. Let me know what you guys think about this one in the comment section below. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. I appreciate that. Consider subscribing if you have not already. So red button down below, and I'll catch you in the next one. My name's Greg. Thanks for learning with me.